since that'll be the last time I get to do that for a while. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Gladly. Commissioner Riddlemeyer? Here. Chair Robbins?
Here.
Vice Chair Rowinski? Here. And Commissioner Narita and Commissioner Michael are absent and excused.
Very good. All right. Let's say a little housekeeping. Let people know that if you're interested in speaking, we have yellow speaker slips at the back, and I think there might be some at the front. If you're participating remotely, use the Zoom and raise your hand feature at the appropriate time. You'll be called on. If you're on the phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand, and when called upon, press *6 to unmute, and we'll repeat that if necessary when we have public comment. First item on the agenda is the election of a commission chair and vice chair. I will open up to the commission for nominations for the chair, though I plan to call my own name first and nominate Susan Rowinski, the current vice chair, to be chair. Any other nominations for that seat? Hearing none, let's vote, if we could, for the chair position.
Can we have a second?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
I second.
Very good. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Riddlemeyer?
Yes.
Chair Robbins?
Aye.
Commissioner Rowinski?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. You are the chair.
And you get to do the next step.
Okay.
Change chairs next meeting. Yeah. This makes it easier. And I don't think I did that right. Whatever.
Okay. Thank you. I'll serve as chair for the until June of June of 2024. Now we're going to nominate our vice chair. Commissioners, do I have a nomination? I would be glad to make one. I would nominate Commissioner Narita as vice chair.
I'll second that.
We'll vote. Commissioner Riddlemeyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Robbins?
Aye.
And Commissioner Rowinski?
Aye.
Motion passes. Commissioner Narita is the vice chair.
Okay, everyone, the next item on the agenda is the consent. It will be an item to approve the minutes from the regular commission meeting dated May 10th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
I'll move approval of those minutes.
I'll second.
Commissioner Riddlemeyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Robbins?
Aye.
And Commissioner Rowinski?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, the next item on tonight's agenda is public comment for persons wishing to comment on an item not appearing on tonight's agenda. State law prevents the commission from acting on any matter not on the agenda. However, comments are welcomed, and staff and the commission will take note of them and may consider them for inclusion into future commission meetings. Madam Clerk, do I have any speakers?
I have no speaker slips from people here in the audience, and there are 2 people online, but I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. Okay, going once, going twice. Okay. Seeing we have no speakers, we will move to the next agenda item. And we'll conclude the public comment section and move to tonight's public hearing to consider an appeal of a wireless permit approved by the Public Works Department at 1901 Parkwood Drive. I think it's just important for everyone to understand in terms of how we'll proceed moving forward. We'll start off with a presentation from staff, specifically J.U., who is our engineering manager. And then we'll return to the commission for questions. And then we'll have Bob, I see Bob in the audience, present his case. And Bob, you have up to 15 minutes. And then we'll open it up for public comment at that point in time after Bob's presentation. Now, I think it's important for everyone to understand, if there is public comment that is not supportive of Bob's appeal position, Bob has an opportunity to rebut. You have a total of 5 minutes. Likewise, following Bob's rebuttal, Mr. Yu could take some time to clarify maybe points that have been discussed. Now, should there be no public comment after Bob's presentation, we will return to the commission for final comments, and then and after final comments, the commissioners will make a determination or will make a motion, and that motion is to approve the permit application and deny the appeal. That is the formal language of our motion tonight. So, with that, Jay, we'll open it up to you.
All right, thank you so much. Let me get the PowerPoint up and running. All right. Giving it a second. It's dark on the screen.
Oh, yeah.
I'll take it away. All right. Good evening, commissioners. J.U., Engineer Manager, Public Works. Thank you for your patience. Tonight, I'll be presenting a wireless permit appeal specifically for 1901 Parkwood Drive. A quick recap on our agenda. I think this will be a relatively quick presentation, but we're going to talk about the wireless permit review process. A couple of things to note. As per our Municipal Code, Section 1710, we're allowed to regulate aesthetics and design standards as the city. There are limitations. The city does not regulate wireless telecommunications provider service, as well as coverage objectives pursuant to applicable laws and San Mateo Municipal Code, Chapter 1710. This chapter is not intended to, nor shall it be interpreted or applied to, 1, prohibit or effectively prohibit any personal wireless service provider's ability to provide personal wireless service. And that's noted by the Municipal Code there. Then we'll jump into the background of the application, and then the appellant then we will talk about the appeal, and then staff's recommendation to deny the appeal, and then talk about the next steps. I want to note that Crown Castle, the applicant, is here. available for questions, and staff is available on Zoom as well. And we also have Ling Wen from our city attorney's office sitting here, available for questions as well. So jumping into our review process, we start by having the applicant submit the wireless permit. Then we submit a notice to all nearby residents within 500 feet, and then staff reviews the application per two standards, the design standards that we have adopted, but as well as aesthetics is what we govern. Limitations, as mentioned earlier, is we cannot limit service as well as coverage objectives. If the application meets all of those criteria, then the application is deemed complete, and then we move forward to the approval process. A conditional approval is then signed by our Director of Public Works, and then we post the decision notice on the city's website. There is then 5 days for the appeal process to occur, and if there are no appeals, then the permit is officially approved. I want to note that there is a shot clock in this process, as defined by the FCC. 60 days if you're building a small cell on an existing structure, and then 90 days for a new structure, so if it's a brand new pole. I want to note that for this specific application, we are right up against the 60-day shot clock, and any extension of it will push us over the FCC requirement of 60 days. So in regards to the application, it was submitted to the city for review on January 31st, 2023. The notice was sent out on February 3rd, 2023. The conditional approval by Public Works was issued on May 5th, and the appeal occurred on the 5th day, on May 10th. The graphic that you're looking at the right shows the proposed location in blue, so that's ultimately what we decided to approve. There are two locations, Alternative 1 and Alternative 2, that did not make the alternative analysis. We deemed it not feasible, but we will talk about that a little bit later. I want to note that this map is different from a presentation that you will see later from the appellant. I want to note that because it's the same nomenclature, but it is different locations. So I want to point that out first because it may get a little bit confusing. In regards to the appeal, the appellant's position is the appellant believes one of the alternative sites, as we discussed earlier, in the application is feasible if the trees are removed. From Crown Castle's response, both alternative sites does not meet Crown Castle's coverage objective in terms of gaps in coverage or lack of capacity. Trees also appear to be on private property. Not confirmed, but from our records, it shows that it's on private property. The appellant has not provided a survey. The city's response, the city cannot regulate how Crown Castle provides service and defines their coverage objective. As a public entity, the city is not allowed to enforce or require the removal of trees in public right-of-way or private property to facilitate a utility. Staff's recommendation: this application satisfies our municipal code, chapter 1710, or design standards and ordinance. The application complies with all FCC regulations. The recommendation from staff is to deny the appeal and uphold the conditional approval of the permit application. Decisions, next steps, as a reminder, as per Municipal Code 1710-70G, the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission shall review the appeal. The decision of the commission shall be final and not be subject to further appeals. So next steps, if you do deny the appeal and recommend this to move forward, the permit will be approved. That's the presentation. J.U. Engineer Manager, Public Works. Thank you for your time.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you, Jay. So let's return back to the commission for questions, and I'll start with Commissioner Rodmeyer.
Thank you for that presentation. The 5-day appeal process, you said that we're getting to the end of the 60-day allowed. but they only have, a person only has 5 days after the city approves. The 500-foot notice went out on February 3rd, and the approval was not until May 5th. Was there any reason why that took so long? It took, what, 3 months?
Specifically, for this application, there were initial discrepancies that we looked at, and there were what we called a notice of incompletion that was submitted, so they had to revise the application and resubmit. And as a result of that, the shot clock actually resets
Okay.
60 days.
So when did the 60 days start?
It started with the first application when it was submitted on January 31st. I don't recall when the notice of incompletion was submitted, but I do have Ryan Brumeyer, who manages the program, available on Zoom. Ryan, I'm not sure if you remember, but if you could assist with that question, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, sure. The notice of incomplete was issued on February 10th, and then the application was resubmitted on March 30th.
So would there be anything in this appeal process that would push us past that 60-day limit? And if so, then the applicant has to start all over? Or what happens?
If it goes past the 60 days, there are a couple of scenarios. One is if the applicant would like, they can submit a letter to say we are past the 60 days and basically deem the application approved.
Thank you. I have a question about the 500-foot limit. Why 500 feet? Can you tell me the background on why 500 feet is chosen?
I was not part of the development of the design standards, but that is what is adopted in our ordinance.
Okay. And 5 days does not seem, that's 5 working days, right? Or 5 calendar days for an appeal.
That, I'm going to defer that to Ryan Brumeyer as well.
It's 5 calendar days.
5 calendar days, okay.
Calendar days.
I'm wondering, what is the basis for 5 days being chosen as opposed to maybe 10 days for an applicant or a resident to appeal?
That again is defined in our Muni Code Section 1710. Wasn't part of the creation of it, but that's what we're adhering to.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Robbins, questions?
Yeah, I won't pretend to remember why we did all that, but back when Brad Underwood was director, and we looked at other, staff took laboring oar, but commission was involved in the shot clock, and quite frankly, the FCC's supremacy in this, the federal law, we just didn't give us a lot of leeway. So distances and time was all trying to give some balance so that people actually had a chance, and we put in the notice provision, insisted on that, and but we're under pretty strict limitations. People spend a lot of time worrying about the technology, and there's absolutely nothing the city can do on that front. So yeah, Susan may remember differently, but I think not. Same. So my questions in this instance, is there any claim, and I can ask the participants, the appellant and the applicant at some point, but Jay, is there any claim that the city didn't comply with the requirements that you're aware of? I read through all the materials, skimmed a lot of the technical stuff, but I didn't see that. Are you aware that they're saying that there's a non-compliance issue?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So the problem just seems to be with the alternatives were not chosen, and okay. I'm did the city play a role in deciding yay or nay on the alternatives, or is that really just the applicant deciding, and we'll ask them why they?
Yeah, so the applicant submits it and the city reviews it in context. If we see anything that may have been missed, we will work with the applicant to see why that's the case. But in this scenario, we did our review and we looked at the alternative sites. It wasn't feasible, and the proposed location is the best option.
Okay. I think I'd like to ask the applicant about that, but that might be later down in the stack here. Or-
Sure, are you saying Crown Castle or?
Yeah, that was, sorry, yeah, I'm being lawyerly. That's the applicant as opposed to the
Right.
appellant.
Actually,
Mr. Kiss versus Crown.
Right.
Yeah,
This would be the opportunity to ask Crown.
okay,
Yep. This is questions to both staff and Crown.
okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Great. Then if I could, I would like to ask somebody from Crown to speak as to what analysis went into the alternatives and what is the problem with the alternatives from your perspective.
Yeah, I'm Tyler Reister. I'm with Kimley Horn, a consultant on behalf of Crown. We do have someone from Crown Castle here as well that can speak. So regarding the alternatives, we evaluated all of the other potential locations within 500 feet. Looking at our coverage objective, which is to cover the homes on Parkwood Drive as well as on Broadview Court from this site to add capacity to the overall network. We deemed that none of the alternatives were feasible to provide that coverage to add capacity for that coverage objective. The only other one that would have been feasible is actually more near to the residences. So that location was deselected pursuant to the design standards to try and select the least obtrusive location. So the location as proposed is what we believe is the least obtrusive location, and based on the staff recommendation, I think that they agree with our assessment.
Is it okay if I have dialogue? Question? Yeah. That analysis, that determination of insufficient coverage, what is that based on? Did y'all do a study or?
So that is based on our customer and their analysis of their network and their decision to add coverage and capacity where they feel it's necessary to provide service.
Okay, so Crown's determination of coverage.
The Crown's customer, the carrier who
Oh,
is
really?
servicing.
Actually, oh, the carrier.
Yes.
Okay. And is that done by engineers, or how do they do that?
That would typically be done by Crown's, or not by Crown, but by the carrier customer's engineering team to determine how to best continue with technology, build on their network, and provide the necessary service to the community.
Okay. I'm good with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jay, can you go back to your prior slide there? Let me just see. Oh, not that. Let's go one more slide. Yeah, let me just see.
The process or?
No, not the process, not that. Let me just see. Keep going. Next slide. And next slide. Okay, prior slide, please. I might refer to that. So I have a couple questions. I will share with everyone. I actually visited the site. I do this on appeals. And I spent roughly about a half hour at the site, walking up and down, taking pictures. And I have a very specific question here. It might be too specific, but when I arrived, I thought pole 3537. Does anybody know that pole? That's right on the corner of 1901 Parkwood. And I said, oh, they chose that pole, which wasn't the case until I found pole 5336. So is there, I guess to some degree, is there a reason why, I guess 3537 wasn't selected? And why was that? If you can be that specific, I'm just curious, because when I looked at it from a transmission perspective, coverage as being ideal, but from a visibility, aesthetics perspective, being far less ideal.
The 5337 you're talking about being
Yes.
less ideal, yeah. And that is, just so that I'm clear, because I don't have the poll numbers in front of me.
I'm
That's
sorry,
on
yeah.
the northeast corner of Parkwood and
Yes.
the north corner.
It would be right where J, yes.
Yep.
It's probably right across the street from 5335.
Yep. So yeah, thank you for asking about that one. That is actually the ideal location
That's what I
for us
thought,
to provide
from coverage.
service to the coverage objective. However, pursuant to the small cell standards for the city, one of the objectives is to locate in the least obtrusive location that still covers the coverage objective. So we felt that we could still adequately cover the coverage objective from the pole that is 5336 across the street, slightly up to the north.
Right.
From that location, and it would be less obtrusive because it was less close to the residences.
Right. It also has vegetation covering as well. I saw some amber trees, some cork, I think they're cork or oak trees, I don't know. Cork, okay. Cork oak. Okay, yes, I did, thank you. I did see the cork oak trees, I did see the amber trees, and so you do get some of that. That does cover what I'm going to say. What if it was on 3537, which is exceedingly stark, versus being across the street, slightly north, and then you do have the vegetation to kind of do some softening.
Yeah, and I think to help clarify that maybe a little bit, at 5336, the trees are not right next to the pole. They're on that side of the street, further away. So where we see issues, and the reason that 3335 is not an adequate candidate is because it's enveloped in the tree, which creates issues for the propagation of the signal.
Right, and I did see 5335, yeah. So I did. I actually went through and looked at each pole number. I walked up the street to get a sense of the poles and look at the vegetation as well, and to look at the neighborhood. And this is why I visit these sites. So anyway, so based on aesthetics and coverage, we'll call it least visually intrusive and coverage. AT&T, I think AT&T is the customer here, I believe.
Verizon is
Verizon.
the customer here.
Okay.
But yes, this is the least obtrusive location that still provides
The coverage.
the coverage
balance.
objective.
Okay.
That's right.
All righty. And then on the trees, if another site was to be considered, we don't know who owns those trees, and that's on private property. Is that HOA, or is that Sugarloaf HOA property, or, okay. All right, I see Bob.
Our records show that it is HOA for Sugarloaf. The
It is
HOA,
Sugarloaf.
yeah. And those are in our maps, but again, I want to clarify that we did not do a survey, so we can't verify, but our early indications are it is on private property.
Okay,
yes.
it is HOA. So let's say the appeal is held up and the trees are removed. Who, is that at the expense of the HOA, and does the HOA replant those trees?
That is completely up to the HOA. We have no involvement in that process.
Okay, so if we were to support the appeal, trees would come down, and that it's really the HOA who would take them down, and would be the HOA who would determine whether there would be trees replanted in their place. Is that?
If you support the appeal, I guess the application will be denied.
Right.
I'm not sure if the appellant has to do anything in particular with their trees.
Got it, because we
Yeah.
might abandon this site.
Yeah, you would not approve it.
Right, this wouldn't be approved, so it may not, there may be no coverage, or going back to what Bob is saying, is looking at their alternative sites. but that may not be ideal for what we need to accomplish.
Yeah, as of now, there are no other feasible locations other than the one that you mentioned on the north side of the intersection.
Right, and that's 53, we have to...
37.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's...
53, 36 are the only two
Are the only two for
locations that
coverage.
meet the coverage objective.
Right, okay. And 5337 is very stark and very apparent. Okay. Okay, I have, you've answered my question, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sure I have another question.
Sure, please.
Okay, sorry. Keeping this one up, because now I've totally lost my train for a moment. I too went and looked at it because I didn't find the pictures helpful. But this picture, the actual proposal is 5336, correct? And this talks about 35.
I could double check, but initially my records show it was 5335 in terms of the street light pole number.
35 is on, I don't know my north-south here, but it's on, yeah, I mean, if it's the little green dot there, it's actually,
It's the yellow dot right over here is the proposed location.
okay, and that would be 36, because 35 would be basically right next to the house. And that can't be what you're looking
Probably
at, right?
36.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, then this,
Oh, no, yeah, 37. 37 would
Yeah.
be right here.
okay, well, that's, yeah.
Maybe we
That's why I'm
can,
confused, because it says 35, and it's next to a little green dot. If it's supposed to be the yellow,
Right.
the yellow Google sign, that's what they use.
we do have Ryan Brumeyer available
Yeah,
here.
actually, the documents say 5336. I think there's a...
Gotcha. I think it is a typo.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 35, but more importantly, it's the yellow, which in this picture is underneath the California SF San Mateo 062. So
There we go. That is the location.
Okay, that's,
There we go. All right.
oh, okay, so it's the typo here and my inability to read where it went. Okay, so we are talking about, in this picture, the left side of that main street that's not Parkwood. What is that north-south looking street there? Is that De Anza, I think? The one that runs parallel to 92, that these poles all run down?
I believe that's Parkwood.
Is that Parkwood?
That's Parkwood and then it goes to Parkwood Drive.
Okay, and then this cross street,
It winds around.
oh, okay, it winds around, so it's Parkwood and Parkwood, if you will. Okay, that's my question. So it is the one I thought, with the little green power box near it, like in the picture. Okay, that's it, sorry, thank you.
Commissioner Von Meyer, any additional questions?
Just to clarify, because these numbers on here are incorrect. So the alternative one would be 5335. And I too went to the location, so I remember looking at the proposed one, 5336, is the one next to that little green or yellow power box, and it actually had the tape still. I could see where the posting had been there. So the alternatives are closer to De Anza, right?
That is correct. I want to note that I believe the alternatives are correct. Outside of 5336, the alternative one, I believe, is 5334, and then 5333 is alternative two per the application.
Okay, because I'm looking at
So
this, and this is 5335 and 5334.
What you're looking at there, I think is the appellant's map. That was not part of the application.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
This seems to be going around.
Right.
May I help clarify? I got the photos here.
Sure. Well, Bob, if you have 15 minutes can you clarify in your presentation?
Well, my presentation is correct with the poll numbers. This is not. That is incorrect. It's 5335 is all one and 5334 is all two. 5333 is further up, and I show it on my
We'll hear him at his presentation.
Yeah, let's go. Why don't we do this? Why don't we have Bob come up and present? Yep, Bob, please. Yep.
Give me a second, Bob. Let me get your presentation up. Take it away.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for having this session, allowing me to present on this topic. I am the homeowner at 1901 Parkwood Drive. I am also coincidentally the president of the Sugarloaf Homeowners Association, and I'm a licensed engineer in the state of California. That influences my analysis and my comments here. Next slide, please. So, this is from the city's website showing the structures and showing where it shows 1901 Parkwood. That's the issued. That's the preliminary approval or whatever those for that location, and those are other small cell units in the neighborhood down to De Anza at the bottom by the park, and then over by the Safeway, those two that are quite near each other. You see a variation in distance there. I just wanted to start with that, and then I'm going to overlay on that the specifics about the situation here. So if you could go to the next slide. So you see 5336, the lowest one. That's what was proposed. And I'll just mention in the application, in the future, if possible, if you could put the poll numbers in the application, it would be helpful. All there is the satellite, the GPS locations. People like me don't know how to use those directly. I went out and got the poll numbers. That would have been helpful in the application. Alt 1 is 335. Alt 2 is 5334. There's one more on that section in between Parkwood. So Parkwood is the long road, but it also bends 90 degrees in that cul-de-sac. That's also Parkwood. And then there's Toyon. That's to the north there. Right. So there's one more pole towards Toyon. That's 5333. And I've laid out, I pasted off, I've laid out the approximate distances. So between 5336 and 5334 is a total of about 300 feet. They're roughly 150 feet apart. And then the distance from Alt 2 to Toyon is around 450 feet. So just putting it in perspective as to what we're talking about in terms of my proposal is to reconsider Alt 2, and I'll tell you why on the next slide or next couple of slides. So again, there's Alt 2, and you can see now in perspective to Toyon and Parkwood, the cul-de-sac leg, and the distance to 1821 Parkwood, where there's an approved station, and then the other ones that are on the map there. And the reason I feel this should be considered is because if you look at the package from the applicant, certainly a part of the reason they didn't consider Alt 1 and Alt 2 was because of the trees right next to those poles. I get it. I want good self-service just like everyone else does. But that was clearly a key reason they did not consider 1 and 2. They've mentioned other reasons. I would question that amount of distance making that much of a difference in the coverage there. If it did, cell service would be impractical for us if that kind of a difference made such a difference in the signal. But it's clearly the trees, and the selected location is more clear of trees, but there are trees all around it. And my point is that if we simply removed one tree at either Alt 1 or Alt 2, it would make Alt 1 and Alt 2 functionally equivalent to the selected location. By the way, I do appreciate that they didn't recommend 5337, because that's literally outside my bedroom. Right. Okay? So I appreciate that, but when I looked at it, I said, Why didn't they consider the other two? And it was only upon getting access to the package that I could understand that, and that's to the point about the 5 days. So we'll get to that later. But if that package had been public record before the approval process, we'd have all been able to get in there and understand what was being proposed, and we could have had some dialogue before. I actually proposed this with Crown Castle. I had a conversation. It was a very cordial conversation. I said, would it make a difference if those trees weren't there? I didn't really get a convincing response out of that. I had to wait for the appeal process to actually see what was in the package. So that's sort of a suggestion on that topic of how maybe that process could be improved if those affected could see the application before having only 5 days. If you can't extend the process beyond 5 days, give us some more time to look at it and maybe shave 5 or 10 days off the city's 60 to 90 days to give residents more time to look at the package. Anyways, that's sort of an aside. Next slide, please. So you can't see it in this display, but so this is the selected location. So there's trees around it, but the pole is clear. Don't disagree with that. If you go to the next slide, here's 35, and there's a big tree to the left of it. That's the cork oak tree. It's got a 17-inch diameter. You'd have to have a permit to remove that because that's a heritage tree. Or it's at least, it meets the city's requirements that requires a permit to remove that. But if you imagine the tree removed, the background then looks just like 5336 from the standpoint of the trees. If you could go to the next slide, 5334, alt number 2, there's a smaller tree and it's kind of directly behind the pole and it's hanging over the pole. This is a non-oak tree. I'm not sure what it is. It's not an oak. It's the 7-inch diameter. No permit would be required for removal. And as stated previously, these properties are Sugarloaf HOA properties, so we would have the right to manage the trees in that area, and any removal would be at the cost of either Sugarloaf or myself as a homeowner. I'll pay for it if I have to. Next slide, please. So proposal, as we've discussed, or as I've tried to lay out the path, in my view, they're all functionally equivalent once an interfering tree is removed at either Alt 1 or Alt 2. The FCC makes their position clear that these can't be forbidden in residential areas because they've deemed that this is acceptable risk. It doesn't mean it's zero risk. There's no such thing as zero risk. And there's aesthetics, there's all of these factors. And as an engineer, you always choose the design approach which reduces the risk of unintended consequences. Alt 1 and Alt 2 reduce those risks. And it's also, from my perspective, simply common sense that locate potentially impacting devices at the most neutral location possible relative to residences, which means furthest from the homes when possible. And Alt 1 and Alt 2 both move it further away from the homes. And as the president of the HOA, I had multiple people that live on that section of Parkwood come to me and say, what can we do about this? We want good cell service, but move it a little further away. What's wrong with those poles right there? So I would ask that the city and the commission consider that and consider the option of proposing Alt 2 would be our preference. We don't need a permit to remove the tree there, so that's a faster process. And request Crown Castle, and I would appeal to Crown Castle as well, really look at this. Is this really going to make a significant difference in the cell coverage if we move it 300 feet from where that is? And if we remove the tree, isn't it functionally equivalent? So that's the proposal that I would make via this appeal process. I think there's one more slide, which is just, oh, sorry. Go forward, I don't want to take any more time. Removal of a tree, if anyone has issues with that, there is a design standard number 3 that says that this facility shall not damage existing trees. Some may ask if that's relevant here. In my view, it's not relevant to landowner activities. Again, if we had known this was being proposed, we would have said, we'll remove a tree there and make that option feasible from that standpoint. So we don't see that as a relevant barrier to following this approach. And I'll just add that Sugarloaf, we maintain hundreds of trees in our area. We have more than 20 acres of open space. There are hundreds of trees that we maintain on an annual basis, nearly 300 just within the nearby distance of the homes that we catalog and maintain on an annual basis. And we provide courtesy trimming for the city next to Laurelwood Park, adjacent to our common area, each year when we conduct annual trimming. So I think we have a good record of concern and care for trees, but in this instance, we think the balance says remove one tree, create a better situation from the standpoint of the residents that are closest to that proposed location. Thank you for your time. Sit down.
Yep. So, thank you, Bob. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up for public comment. And once again, if there is public comment not supportive of the appeal or the city and Bob will have a chance to do a rebuttal. If there's no public comments, we'll return to the commission for final questions, and then after final questions and comments, make a determination. So do we have any public comment?
I have no speaker slips, but I have one raised hand. Oh, do you want to fill out a? We'll start first with those in attendance.
Okay. And like I said, we'll have another round of questions here from the commission before we go into final comments and then final decisions and final motion.
We have Tabitha Schneider.
Good evening. I'm the permitting supervisor for Crown Castle, and we do this in a lot of jurisdictions, and we totally respect all the public comments that come in. There's a lot of different things that are brought up at all of these different meetings, and I wanted to say that a lot of times people think that moving a small cell facility a couple hundred feet doesn't make that big of a difference, but it does. The equipment for small cell facilities is designed, to have a couple hundred feet in range. Right. So a lot of times when we're in a community and folks, stand up and talk about, well, just move it 200 or 300 or 400 feet that way, a lot of times you lose your coverage objective. When we start out and we get a site where they want to densify a network, we, first of all, take into account municipal code and try to pick the least, we don't want to put something in front of somebody's house, obviously. And then we have to look at state code and federal, guidelines. And then we also have GO 95, which restricts a lot of ways we can put equipment on wood poles if we're going on wood poles. So there's a lot of things that we have to take into account. But a lot of these federal regulations exist because, wireless is important. Broadband is important. It's part of our economic development within our communities. Our emergency services operate on it. So it's important that networks operate and function effectively. So, when we're looking at things and we're considered a utility in the state of California, so if PG&E was going to hang something up on the pole, or the cable companies were going to hang something up on the pole, would they do an alternative analysis and have to get permission to do that? So, we try to follow the guidelines and pick the best place, and most of the times we still get comments about what we're putting up on poles, but we do try to do a really thorough analysis. But we hope that with everything presented, we can't control trees, and I think it creates kind of a slippery slope if we would say, okay, we're going to move over here, and there's no power for jurisdiction for the city to, in turn, make sure that a tree gets removed. Then if we move it to another location, what if somebody says, well, we like it, but just move it one pole over? It creates a slippery slope. So, we did follow the municipal guidelines, the state guidelines, the federal guidelines, and we hope at the end of the day, you guys will take that into account and approve our project. So, thank you.
Okay, and thank you. Cookie, we have a remote, we have another public comment? Another person would like to speak?
Yes, Thomas Morgan. Hold on, and you should be able to speak now.
Hello, this is Thomas Morgan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Thomas Morgan, Sunnybury resident. I am on a city committee, but the comments tonight are my own as a private resident. The first comment I had was the presentation of the appellant wasn't really visible via Zoom. Mostly got the clock timer, so be careful in the future. I know these meetings have some challenges of being remote. First question is, I keep hearing the 60-day time limit. So in the staff's presentation, there was the 90 and a 60, so I just wanted to clarify if this is a new or existing piece of equipment. And then overall, I felt the appellant made a great presentation and was very thoughtful and considerate, and I would support the appeal. And I hope that the commission will support his appeal as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a comment. Can you please fill out would you like to speak? Yes. Yeah. If you could just fill out a speaker slip and hand that to our Madam Clerk.
Henry Pagalinan.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Henry Pangilinan, and I'm a longtime resident of San Mateo. I'm here to support the appeal of Rob and the HOA. One of the reasons why I support it is that I found out that there is a deficiency on the appeal process, as it is skewed towards the telecom companies or the applicants. The appellant is only given 5 days, as you have discussed already, from the permit issue date to filing of the appeal. This period is not adequate to make a thorough investigation of the documentation used as basis for permit issuance. That's for us, for the people who are affected in that particular area. And it is not possible to do our review, during the review process prior to the permit issuance, as neither side, the engineering office, nor the network applicant respond to requests for information. So I really recommend that this appeal process be extended. I'm not sure whether you have the capability to do that, but probably that's something that you can request the city council to amend the city resolution in order to to change that appeal process, the 5 calendar days. It's a calendar days, it's not even business days. And it's not really good. But with regards to the second thing is that with regards to the technology, we are already talking about the 6G. It is already on the drawing board. 6G will replace the 5G. And there will be a lot of new poles coming up. There will be a lot of applications. And since I already retired, I took the liberty of going around and getting all the signals of all these poles. And I was really amazed on what I found. I know that we are constrained because of the FCC rule. We are really constrained. We feel that we have the constraint, but actually we don't have. The city government, they only have to raise their voice, and the commission, I appreciate the work of the commission. I reviewed most of your published LinkedIn information, and many of you are involved on what you call environmental advocacy. And I really appreciate that. But nobody, I haven't seen any information about advocacy on EMF or the electromagnetic field or radiation frequency effect. So I suggest, that is my suggestion, is that probably we spend some hours understanding it so that it can help, us evaluate the appeals like what we are doing. So, because everything we are covering up on the, what do you call that, the technicalities, because we say our hands are tied. So that's the reason why, the main reason that we are appealing this process is that because, yeah, we like the technology, but we would like to mitigate the risk. I used to work for a broadband equipment manufacturer, so I know this too. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I see no other hands raised.
No other hands raised. Okay. I'd like to offer, Bob, would you like to rebuttal anything? And then followed by staff, if you would like to clarify anything that was said. And then we'll come back to the commission for some final questions, comments, and then we'll make a motion.
Yes. I would like to clarify and just show this image again in terms of the map. So if you could give me a second here. There is a difference in terms of what Robert, the appellant, has presented. The map that you're looking at here, and I actually updated the poll number to 5336 just for reference on the fly here for more accurate discussion. What was submitted on the application, this is indeed alternative 1 and alternative 2. So what the appellant was referring to in their proposed site is actually alternative 1 in the application, but in his presentation, it was referred to as alternative 2. So I just want to make that clarification. So it is indeed their proposed location for an appellant is to remove it from the proposed site at 5336 to 5334.
Okay, right, okay. 5336.
Madam Chair, if I may as well.
Please.
2 legal points. Ling Wen, Assistant City Attorney. Number 1, the appellant spoke about unintended consequences of a cell structure. I'm assuming he's alluding to RF emissions. I want to point out that law, including San Mateo Municipal Code, disallows any sort of appeal based on RF emissions that are compliant with FCC regulations. So I do want to note that for the commission. Number 2, and this is important, it's very significant because The city has limitations too. The city, per its ordinance, per law, does not regulate how provider provides service. It regulates aesthetics. And we've heard from Crown Castle, the two alternative sites do not achieve their objectives in coverage or capacity. So that I think is very significant for the commission to consider. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Please, Bob.
I guess since you offered me the opportunity to rebut, I don't believe in the package there was any detail on that assessment, of the coverage capacity. It wasn't there. So as a affected resident, I look at it, I say, I haven't seen any data supporting what they say just because they say it. So it's not there in the package. And Jay, are you sure about the alternatives? As I was saying before, it's just the GPS locations, but there's a pole in between there. It just doesn't make sense that they would skip a pole in the sequence that they were looking at. Are you sure?
Can I respond?
Yep, please.
Yes. So there is a poll in there, and that was something that the applicant and the city had discussed after the packet had been approved, but it was not part of the original alternative site assessment. Yes. But what we're showing here is what was submitted at the application.
Yeah.
Okay, and the numbers here are accurate.
That is correct. So
What I refer to as 2 is 5334.
that is correct.
I didn't believe that 5333 was alternate 2.
Yes.
It's in the other direction, which doesn't make sense from the standpoint of your claim that 100 feet makes a difference. I'm just saying that's still confusing because there's a pole in between.
Right, there's it's 5335.
5335.
Right. And it is not in here for whatever reason. 5334 is, and 533. And these are Crown Castle's final alternatives.
That is correct.
Right.
So then I would amend my appeal to say just be clear, it's 5334. That's what I was referring to.
Yes.
Right.
So
As alt 2.
officially in the packet, alternative 1.
Right. And both alternative 1 and 2 do require a removal of a cork oak. But then we go back to the issue of coverage, right?
Alt 2, meaning 5334 is a cork oak?
5333.
5333 is a cork oak. Yes, that's the one I referred to. 5333, I didn't think we were talking about that one. I didn't look closely at it, so I can't speak to it. I
Right.
thought it was too far the other direction. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
But to your point, both alternative 1 and 2, as identified by the applicant, does not meet their coverage objective.
Right. Would anybody else like to speak? Bob, any other further comments?
Thank you.
Crown Castle.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak again. I think just to add to a couple of the things that were mentioned, the decision to add capacity in this area and add service and coverage is not a gap analysis. There doesn't need to be a gap in service to clarify a need for additional coverage. The service gaps in the network have mostly been closed over the past decades. Now the goal is to increase capacity so that folks can effectively use the network. And so in order to do that, we need to place our facilities where they reach the folks and provide coverage. So as we talk about moving sites 100 feet, it doesn't necessarily mean that the coverage from that site is even going to reach the coverage from the next site over,
Right.
but it takes enough people off of the network that the network can then perform better as a whole. So if we move the site away from the coverage objective here, we might be covering only trees, which doesn't do anything to support the overall network. So that's the point on coverage. I think related to the process and the thought of removing trees, we are following the guidelines provided by the city in the city standards. And while there may be one appellant or a number of folks who have commented who believe that removing trees is less obtrusive, per the city's interpretation of what is obtrusive based on the design guidelines, removing trees is more obtrusive based on the city's guidelines and their approved documentation. Right. So that is what we have moved forward with in the proposal. We believe that this is the least obtrusive location that supports the coverage objective to provide better service to the community. And we believe that staff agrees with that assessment. So we would ask that the appeal be denied.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Please. Yep.
While you're up there. Yeah, and I understand, I defer to counsel, because I am an attorney, but not for the city. I know our role here is not to mediate, so this, I apologize, this sounds like a mediation, and it's not, but I am curious if indeed the alternative that required removal of the non-heritage tree, since I was involved in that ordinance too a long time ago, if that tree was removed, would your coverage issues be taken care of, or would they'd be insufficient?
We've looked very closely at 5333, 334, and 335, in addition to our proposal for 336. I believe you're referring to 334, the non-heritage tree. That site is just simply too far away from the coverage objective for us to meet that objective from that location, regardless of any interference.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you
welcome.
for your answer.
Thank you.
Well, actually, that opens up, now we'll bring it back to the commission for final questions and comments, and then we will make our motion. You know, I'd like to just open up here. Both Commissioner Robbins and I were part of the writing of this ordinance. For everyone here, it took us over a year to write this, and that was a year to just go to City Council. And once City Council had it, it was roughly another 6 months there. So this has been 18 months of the making. And I have to share this with everyone too, and we spent an enormous amount of time talking about public health. But as our attorney, and we went around and around, and as our attorney cited, it's really out of our wheelhouse. Technically, it's out of the wheelhouse, of the city's wheelhouse. Now, regarding public comment, and I do want to go into that, it appears that conditional approval was posted on May 5th. And that was posted on the city's small cell infrastructure website. I do not remember, is there a notice that goes out to residents at that point in time? I seem to recall there is. Is there a notice that was sent out to residents?
If you are signed up in the website to get notices, you will get notices. But if you don't sign up, you won't get a notice.
You won't get notice?
Yes.
Okay.
And
All right.
I want to clarify in the beginning, when we send the 500-foot notice to all the affected areas that there is a proposed location, we do indicate that if you want to get future notices in regards to small cells, this is how you sign up. So we do direct them to the website to sign up if
Right.
they want future notices.
Right. And that notice that is sent out to residents within 500 feet, is that done after, is that done when the director makes a decision, or was that done on roughly May 5th-ish?
That was done on February 3rd.
February 3rd.
So it's right after the application has been
Right. You
received.
see, that's what I remember, right? So the application was received. The notice goes out very early in the process. So the notice went out very early. No, I see Bob. So the notice went out very early in the process. And I remember going through this because we had the shot clock. And what we decided to do back then was to send out the notice roughly to that 500-foot radius to what would be a proposed site to get the word out. This ran in parallel as the process was being reviewed by the city. And then we have the city's website, and then we have this, really what is our last comment period, this kind of 5-day period where I saw the posting onto the lamppost itself, or onto the street light itself. So, and I remember we went through this, and this is why it took us over a year to write, was to make sure we could put in adequate public comment and yet still meet shot clock requirements. So I just want to put that out there for everyone. So anyway, we'll go to Commissioner Rodmeyer for questions and final questions.
First, on this map, I'm seeing that there's a legend that says expired, under review, issued, pending. So obviously these expire. So what is, if this is approved, how long will it be in effect? And that can be either through the permit time or the device longevity time. So both of those. How long is this expected to be permitted for? And then how long do you think that this device will last?
So the permit lasts for 10 years. In terms of how long the device will last, I do not know that. Maybe Crown Castle has more data in regards to the technology, but the permit lasts for 10 years.
Unfortunately, I don't have any specifics on how long the equipment can last for from a reliability and design perspective that way, but it is intended to last through the functional life of this type of technology. So it would be intended to basically last until it becomes obsolete from a technical and coverage network perspective.
From your experience, how long do the older ones, how long does it take before they're outdated?
It takes quite a while. I think responding to something that was said earlier, I think in the industry, we're really focused on 5G right now. The network is still on a 4G core. I haven't, being intimately familiar with the industry, I have not heard any talk of 6G. So this technology will be around for quite a while.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I have another question about if what the applicant is calling alternative 1, 5334, were to be chosen, then that is closer to some homes on Toyon Court. Have those, is there any chance that there would be another appeal if the alternative were chosen?
I don't know for certain. It has to, I don't even, looking at this map, is sure if 5334 would be within the 500-foot radius from here. So but I can't define that.
And another question is, again, if that alternative at 5334 were chosen, from the image that I see here, and also from my recollection of being there, would that tree actually need to be removed to meet the coverage objectives, or could it be trimmed?
From what I heard from the applicant, regardless of the tree, it won't meet the coverage objective.
Okay. And that's because we're looking at like this purple line is the coverage objective, correct? Is that correct?
I am unsure. I think the purple line is, we'll have the applicant define the purple line.
Can't really see on the screen there, purple line, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Purple line.
Yeah, so I believe the purple line is the 500-foot radius, which is required by the city standards for the noticing as well as for the alternative sites analysis. I should clarify that the 500-foot radius is not something that is related to the industry or to the coverage or the technology. That's simply the city's decision on requirement. So sometimes that's mistaken for a potential range where a facility would work to meet the coverage objective, and that is not the case.
Is there anything that does show what the coverage objective is?
The coverage objective here is the homes on Parkwood Drive as well as on Broadview Court. So those are the facilities, they're the places where there's population that we're trying to cover to increase capacity.
And what is their cell reliability at this point without?
So as I mentioned earlier, it's likely, based on the progress that's been made over the last decades, that they do have coverage in that area. But per the FCC, it's not required to show a gap in coverage to define a need for additional capacity add. So the goal here is to add capacity so that the network continues to function effectively for people. So even if you have coverage, if you're not able to do anything because the data is not able to get to you, we see that as an issue for the network.
Okay. And thank you.
Thank you.
Again, in the appeal, I understand that the city's hands are really tied because of the FCC regulations. Was there anything in the appeal about the aesthetics or the design, or is it just the placement?
Our perspective, it's the placement. The initial site that was shown was a little too close to the home, a little too intrusive. So the proposed site actually pushes that back, as we mentioned earlier. But it's specifically the location.
Okay. Thank you.
Final questions, comments?
Final comments, yeah.
Okay, final comments.
Yeah. I think I've run out of questions, which is rare. I want to just mention to the appellant, Mr. Kiss, I really appreciate your concern, and particularly your effort, which is considerable. When we were involved early on, pushing for that 500-foot notice an early notice was something that Susan and I both worked on to get staff to do. We thought it was important. And it amazes me how rarely people do take the time and effort. So I think it's really appreciated. And then here comes the however, unfortunately, from my perspective. One note to staff, to the extent it's possible, I've heard some concern about the sufficiency of information that people get when the notice goes out, and the shot clock, it just kills us all. But to the extent more information can be pushed down or made available, then the better the process will be. So that's just a sort of an editorial comment. My view is, we'll get to the motion in a moment, but is that I think the code, the law, it makes it pretty clear there's has to be deference to the applicant's coverage objective, and I don't see we have any claim of non-compliance with the law here. So as much as we might like to have a different tree, I can't see supporting the appeal.
Commissioner Rottmeyer, comments? Any comments before we go to motion?
No, I'm good.
Okay. I'll just make a couple of comments here. Bob, you've given, and out of the many installations we've had very few appeals. And of those we've had, Bob, you did a very commanding job. I think it's important that when you make these decisions to be sensitive of precedent. And I regret, and I regret this, Bob, but like Commissioner Robbins, I'm seeing here that everything was carried out according to plan, public notice, analysis, and the law being both federal, state, and city. And like I said, we have these to ensure consistency and precedent. Now, one of the speakers talked about modifying the current ordinance. That's possible, and if that's of interest, I would contact the appropriate city staff person to possibly begin that discussion. But I will share with you, we spent here on this commission a year, and we had meetings going until midnight. It was so controversial back in 2016 and 2018. And it was controversial because, frankly, of the health concerns, the aesthetics. We just didn't know. Back then, I will share with everybody, Governor Brown vetoed, it was his last bill he vetoed in his last year. It was his last bill he vetoed in October of what would be 2017, 2018. And the bill that he vetoed, and this is really important to understand, was to allow cities, that is, the bill he vetoed would have prohibited cities from having appeals and public comment periods like we have in our city. So that's important to understand. It was a bill that he vetoed, and this bill would have prohibited public comment and public notification. And it was a bill sponsored by the telecom communication, and I get it, for their interest. But part of the reason we're here is because of Governor Brown vetoing that bill. And I want to share this with everyone because back then there was a lot of controversy. This was also the state was in to try to manage this and take control out of the cities and the towns throughout California, and he vetoed that bill, so that was very key. So, and thankfully, things did not turn out as bad as we all thought back in 2016, 2017, 2018. The sky is not falling down with small cells all over the place. We do have an opportunity to notify and to hear appeals. So, enough with that. I'm going with a little bit of history here. I'm going to move ahead with the motion, and that motion is for the commission to approve the permit application and deny the appeal. This is the language I was given. So, Commissioner Rodmeyer?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you.
We'll come to a vote. Commissioner Riddlemeyer?
Yes. I understand the concern here, but I also understand that the city's hands are really tied. And I think on that basis, I'm going to have to,
Yes. Do you,
Point of clarification.
Do you approve the permit and deny the appeal?
A yes vote
So a yes
does that.
vote would
Yes.
approve the permit and deny the appeal. Because of the regulations, I think I'm going to have to say yes to this. But if I could also say now, I would, that 5-day comment period is concerning to me. If we can change that for the future, I would put that on the table.
Okay. Commissioner Robbins?
Commissioner Robbins?
Yes.
Commissioner Rowinsky?
Yes, regretfully.
The motion passes 3-0.
Everyone, yes. Bob, yes, you're excused. Thank you. No, thank you for your thoroughness. Okay, let me, okay. Okay, everyone, next on tonight's agenda, under the old business section, is for the public and commission to receive our quarterly update. This is our Q2 update on pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure projects and planning efforts. No motion is, oh, can we close that door? Yeah, thank you. No motion by the commission is needed because this is an informational update. We will begin with the presentation from Sue Ellen Atkinson, Principal Transportation Planner for the City of San Mateo. After Sue Ellen's presentation, it will be followed by questions from the commission to staff, and then we'll move to public comments made by video or phone. Once public comments are heard, I will bring the discussion back to the commission for final questions and comments for Sue Ellen. Sue Ellen, thank you. Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you as well. Sue Ellen Atkinson, Principal Transportation Planner. Chair Rowinski, thanks for having me. Commissioners. As noted, I'm here for a quarterly-ish bike and pedestrian program update. All right. So tonight we'll be going through current infrastructure projects and then current planning projects in the bike and pedestrian realm. So the first project is the Delaware Street Safe Routes to School Corridor project. That's a project where we received full funding for design and construction from the State Active Transportation Program, or ATP, for this project. And that involves implementing, designing and constructing the Class 4 separated bike lane and bicycle boulevard along Delaware Street as proposed in our 2020 Bike Master Plan. So we are currently finalizing the request for proposals, or RFP, on this project for design services, and staff expects to get that out for solicitation within the next month or two. Next up is the 28th Avenue Gap Closure Project. So that's another grant-funded effort for design and environmental review for bike and ped connectivity on 28th Avenue from Edison Street across El Camino, connecting to the Hillsdale Caltrain Station access. We awarded the agreement for design services in September 2022. As seen in the photo on the screen, we did a site visit with stakeholders including Caltrans, Samtrans, Commute.org, the Bike Coalition, police, and fire. And as part of that effort, realized that expanding the scope to include additional geography on 28th Avenue made a lot of sense in closing some additional gaps in that area. So just to guide you through, on 28th Avenue, we have an existing bike boulevard right here designated by Section 1. We also have an existing bike boulevard and Class 1 shared use path further east as designated by number 5. So this project initially was scoped to just look at area number 2 for a Class 4 and then connectivity across El Camino. When we were doing, and also connectivity to the existing Class 1 under the Hillsdale Caltrain Station. When we were out doing the site visit, we realized that if we were able to add additional budget to that project, we would be able to scope in on-street bike improvements at the Delaware Street intersection, coinciding with that Safe Routes to School project mentioned previously, and then on-street bike facilities connecting into that existing bike boulevard. So we were able to do that. That's sections 3 and 4 here. So we're looking at a potential Class 2 or Class 4 on-street under the Caltrain station, and then potential Class 2 striped on-street bike lane. And that will give us the full connectivity all the way through 28th Avenue. So that amendment was approved by City Council earlier this month. So we'll be resuming that project with conceptual design shortly. Next is pavement management program integration, so just a couple of updates there. We have our Smooth Streets Phase 3 project in construction. The bicycle boulevard on Sunnybrae is going to be striped shortly, so that will be in place soon. As part of the 4th and 5th and railroad crossing improvements, we're implementing a Class 2 bike lane on 5th Avenue. So that was recently awarded and will be in construction shortly. And then as part of the pavement management program Phase 2A, we implemented new striping at Burrell and Beauvais, and also some striping modifications for the school zone speed limit program, which I'll be discussing shortly. Right now, actually. So the school zone speed limit project is the implementation of reduced speed limits in qualifying school zones. So we did an initial review of all of the schools within the city of San Mateo and all of the roadway segments that were contiguous to those schools. And based on stipulations in the California Vehicle Code, we were able to identify roadway segments that qualified to be reduced to either 15 miles per hour or 25 miles per hour. They needed to meet certain requirements, like having no more than 2 lanes of travel, being within a residence district, and having posted speed limits no more than 30 miles per hour currently. So we identified all of the street segments that qualified, presented to City Council, and were approved to move forward in phases. So the first phase is implementing reduced speed limits near our public elementary and middle schools, which we're doing as we speak. Phase 2 will be our public high schools, and Phase 3 will be private schools. So we're working on outreach for this program. The implementation or construction for this project is very minimal. It's primarily speed signs and striping modifications or roadway legend modifications. So we're doing quite a lot of outreach alongside that. And our expectation is the outreach that we're doing right now for this initial phase will be able to be reutilized for the 2nd and 3rd phases. So in looking at Phase 1, that again is the public elementary and middle schools that qualify. So that is scattered throughout the city. Quite a number of roadway segments are included in that Phase 1. So we're doing, along with Phase 1, we're doing a phased outreach approach as well. So we have stage 1 of public outreach, which was pre-construction. So we've already done that. We went out with a mailer to residents on segments where the speeds are going to be reduced. We worked with our colleagues at the San Mateo Foster City School District to send messaging out through principals. And we did social media outreach citywide to let folks know that reduced speed limits were going to be coming. There we go. That's where we were. So we completed that in May 2023. Then June 7th, last week, was the last day of school. We are expecting construction to be done around late July, early August. So stage 2 of the outreach is going to be immediately following the construction. That'll be focused on residents near those segments. And we intend to do things like social media outreach, and then also having the trailers set up that can say, you know, something like new speed limits, new posted speed limits, abide by laws, et cetera. That brings us to August 15th, which is the first day of school for our elementary and middle schools. So the anticipated stage 3 of the outreach is really focused on back to school safety, road safety, be careful, students are out on the roadways, et cetera. It is possible that the end of construction and that first day of school may be pretty close, so we may combine the 2nd and 3rd phases of outreach and do one larger set of outreach for that. Moving on, for our Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG program for this year, we conducted a project in North Central and North Shoreview to remove sidewalk tripping hazards. Initially, 4,800 repairs were identified and scoped into the project. When the crews were out in the community, they identified additional repairs that needed to be made. So there was, the final total was 5,018 tripping hazards removed. So we have a few befores and afters here. So you can see the tripping hazard here removed in the second photo. And then one more before and after. This project was completed on schedule and on budget this month. Next project, 19th Avenue Fashion Island, Class 4 Bikeway. This is a joint project being conducted with the County Transportation Authority and Samtrans in conjunction with a future mobility hub at the Park and Ride along 19th Avenue. So this involves the feasibility, design, and construction of the bike facility and smart corridor elements, as well as a mobility hub for future Samtrans Express buses. So right now, we're currently in the early summer 2023 engagement phase 1, and we are kicking off on June 23rd with a short bike and walk tour for stakeholders, walking and then biking the corridor just to get a sense of existing conditions. So we are asking for any commissioner interest in joining us, and we would welcome 1 or 2 commissioners joining us that day. All right, moving into planning projects, we have the San Mateo Complete Streets Plan. So that's our multimodal plan combining a number of our current active transportation and green infrastructure plans, and in support of General Plan 2040 that is underway right now. So currently we have completed existing conditions review, and we are kicking off community engagement for this plan. We are also working on building the citywide network, needs analysis, assessing where the needs are, where future demand is, et cetera. So in order to build that map and determine, having all of these different plans coming together and figuring out where the needs are within the city, we're really taking a layered approach here. So identifying all of the inputs that we have, such as priorities, safety, collision data, ADA transition, equity priority communities, and then layering all of that together. And that gives us a map that really highlights where those cumulative needs are. It also gives us a map with a lot of lines on it. So we need to figure out what to do with that map and how we prioritize all of those lines to figure out how to move forward with projects. So that map with a lot of lines is the citywide transportation needs map. So all of those need inputs, the network priorities, the barriers to transportation, safety, et cetera, those are all correlated to the 4 overarching goals for the Complete Streets Plan, which is providing transportation options, safe and comfortable travel, equity, mobility, and access, and inclusive engagement. So we started from the goals, figured out all of the inputs that we had in order to identify where the needs are in the city. And we come out with a map that needs prioritization. And that's where we need to figure out how do we weigh each of those goals when we're looking at the cumulative needs. So we identified 3 weighing scenarios that were considered as we were moving through the process. The first is looking at safety first and foremost. So what that involved was weighing, assigning a weight of 2x for the safety inputs, such as collision data and data that was identified through our local road safety plan work to date. All of the other goals were assigned a weight of 1x, so they're still priorities. The projects are still maintained in the map, but those safety inputs, the areas of the city that have safety needs, were really highlighted in that option. The second option is safety first, so 2 times weight, but also providing weight to equity and options. And if I can step back for just one moment, when we were going through this internally with staff, with our internal interdepartmental working group, and also our external working group, these options were the ones that we came up with after discussing how do we weigh things, what are the priorities in the community. So this second option spoke to some of the comments that were raised, which was, let's see how it looks if we're looking at options and equity as well. And then the third option was all of the goals are high priority, all of them are the same priority essentially. And in looking at the maps that came out of this, so when we assigned a weight, things came up as high priority, medium priority, and a lower priority, depending on how the weighing worked out. The safety, weighing the safety twice, really aligned with the general plan goals that are going through process right now. It aligns with the Vision Zero goal that is included in the circulation element, and it aligns with the City Council goals for safety on our transportation network. When looking at option number 2, the areas that really were highlighted were areas that had high safety needs and then high equity needs. And that called out our downtown San Mateo and really called out North Central as well. And we have separate planning efforts that are going on for both of those areas. We have the Complete Streets North Central Plan, and we also have a downtown circulation study that will be funded in the next fiscal year. So that mapping exercise really highlighted the need for those 2 separate efforts to focus in on those areas because they really rose to the top in terms of safety and equity. However, in the citywide plan, we're really trying to look citywide. So while weighing equity and options called out those areas where we're doing separate planning efforts, it did not lend as much to a citywide focus. And then option 3, where all goals have the same weight, it's really reflected existing conditions. It doesn't give much information because if everything is a priority, then nothing really comes out as a priority. So in looking at that, the staff recommendation, based on all of that evaluation and inputs from the internal working group and external working group, is to move forward with weighing safety twice, or 2x rather. This really allows us to focus on areas citywide where there are safety inputs. It really also as well highlights the need for those separate studies in downtown and in North Central to really do the deeper dive into those areas. And it allows more focus on arterials and collectors where the safety needs are really very pronounced. So tonight we're looking for concurrence with the staff recommendation to move forward with mapping towards safety. In terms of community engagement, we've just kicked that off. We've done an extensive round of stakeholder interviews, so one-on-one stakeholder interviews. We also conducted, with our colleagues at the San Mateo Foster City School District, a really great focus group with school families last week that was well attended and was a really great experience. We are doing a walk and transit tour tomorrow, a bike tour scheduled for the 23rd, and then we'll be at the Central Park 4th of July event and the College of San Mateo Farmers Market next month as well. And then we've spoken about the Complete Streets North Central Plan. That agreement was approved by City Council in May, so we've started working on that and are currently engaged in identifying the community outreach strategy for that plan. Citywide Transportation Demand Management, or TDM ordinance, that's another planning project that we're working on right now. We will be returning to you next month with a focused presentation on that. So just an introduction. This project is really looking to take a comprehensive approach to TDM throughout the city by recommending trip reduction goals throughout the city. Most of you are very familiar with the rail corridor TOD area. That's the only portion of the city where we have defined trip reduction goals. So through this project, we're looking to propose an ordinance to expand trip reduction goals throughout the city. That's funded by an MTC technical assistance grant, and we'll be back next month with additional information on that project. The local road safety plan is a project that our traffic engineering team is heading up. That project is analyzing collision patterns in the city to identify safety improvement recommendations for specific safety hotspots. This plan is required for maintaining Caltrans funding eligibility, and it will also be another input that's folded into the Complete Streets plan. So on this project, the existing conditions assessment is complete, and we'll be doing community engagement on that project this summer as well. So in terms of commission feedback, 2 points specifically. That 19th Avenue Fashion Island Bike and Walk Tour on Friday, June 23rd is at 10 a.m. We are looking for 1 to 2 commissioners if you're interested in joining us on that tour. So again, it's a walk portion and then a bike portion. And then the citywide complete streets plan, we are asking for confirmation of the approach recommended for prioritization. And with that, I'll conclude the staff presentation and open any questions.
So once again, we'll start with questions from the commission, and then we'll go back to the public, and then back to the commission with final questions and comments. So Commissioner Robbins, questions?
No questions.
Commissioner Rottweiler, questions?
Yes, questions. Thank you for that presentation. Good to see. Let's start with the, well, for one, I know that there was a Safe Routes to School staff call. I'm just wondering if you have an update on if somebody was found and when they are going to be starting.
Yes, we were successful, and we hired our first part-time Safe Routes to School coordinator, and she started with us yesterday.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we're very excited to have her on board.
Yes. So you showed the map of the school zone, near school zones, 50 miles per hour. And I don't know if we can click back to that map. Mm-hmm. Is that possible?
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
Okay, great. So I can't wait until I start to see these 50 mile per hour signs near some of these schools. The one that I'm the most familiar with is this Burrell Middle School. And I'm actually wondering, was the backside of the school looked at all? Because there's a lot of traffic at that backside, which is on Burrell. What this map is showing is the 15 miles per hour will be on Edinburgh and Barneson. Mm-hmm. And then 25 miles per hour, which it currently is on those other parts of Barneson and Edinburgh. But there's a lot of traffic on Burrell Avenue, which is, there's an back entrance to that school, and there's buses and cars and bicyclists. And right now that's 30 miles per hour. And there's actually a shared bike lane on Burrell in the 30-mile-hour zone. So is that going to be reduced as well?
The California Vehicle Code allows implementation of reduced speed limits if certain criteria are met. I'd have to look back at that location specifically, but there is a requirement that the roadway segment is within what's defined by the CVC as a residence district, which requires a certain density of households to be on the street segment. So it's possible that that area did not qualify because of that requirement, which, for example, is the same reason that Meadow Heights Elementary did not qualify, because there's the park and then the woods area. There's not the density of houses nearby that is required to comply. So in the area with more office park, and then the back of the school, it's possible that that's the criteria that was not met.
Okay, so this is, which criteria is this?
California Vehicle Code.
Okay. Whew. Yeah, there's a lot of commercial space there, but there is a lot of there are some homes, and I'm really curious what the criteria are and if those could be made available.
We can check into that.
Yeah. So recently there was pavement management in this area as well. I'm going to stick on in this community for a while, because it just underwent some repaving on Barneson and Burrell and also Beauvais. And Beauvais was a segment that is in the bicycle master plan as being a separated, one of the medium priorities segments for separated bike lane. And then when it was recently repaved, it was not made into a separated lane, it was made into, it was already an existing share lane, and those sharrows were just repainted. which is nice. They're bright and visible now. But I've corresponded with Azalea, and it's been explained to me that it would be, or it was too much of a financial and staff strain to try to make that a separated lane at the moment. And I'm just wondering what would have made that possible. I know that there are several office parks there and commercial spaces, and that the driveways for those were problematic when it comes to making a separated bike lane. There were a lot of hurdles. And I'm wondering what would help staff succeed in this situation, or if this is encountered in another part of the city, what is needed by staff to make something that's already in the bicycle master plan as something that should be a separated lane. So it's already been through some public process and some staff process. This would be a good place for this to be separated, which is a much safer lane for bicyclists. What do we need to make that happen? Is it?
If I can chime in. Hi, Azalea Mitch, Public Works Director. Thank you for your question. Sue Ellen, we don't have, I don't know if maybe the backup slide. So our bicycle master plan, as you noted, went through a pretty extensive public outreach process. It is a great document in the sense that it really focuses on stressors and it prioritizes segments. So over the past few years, we have been working on a strategy to implement. It is a $33 million effort to implement the entire bicycle master plan, so it's not something that can be done overnight. At the same time, we do have our pavement management program, but our strategy has focused, as Sue Ellen shared, on quite a few studies and implementation of right now. The big effort is, for example, 19th Avenue and Fashion Island corridor. So we cannot implement everything at once. We wish we could, but in terms of what it would take to make this happen, I mean, the reality is we have, like I shared with you, we have 3 traffic engineers and 2 planners, and we are limited with respect to scope, bandwidth, and funding. And so we're trying to be much more strategic as it relates to high priorities. Just 2 years ago, we worked in the North Central community and, did extensive bicycle work, and that effort had significant impact. So we're being much more strategic, and we're going back into the North Central community to develop a complete streets plan specific for the area. So we are extremely busy, and I think it's good to also speak to expectations that just because a street is getting a slurry seal treatment or paving, it doesn't necessarily mean that the opportunity is quite there to develop the network, because we're also looking at opportunities to not just build segments piece by piece, but larger networks. So it is, it really is a resource issue, but we are doing what we can here to make sure that we're strategic about the implementation, as we also have to address the pavement conditions. And that's a priority, because we're trying to avoid failed streets that would cost the city a lot more in the long run.
Thank you for bringing up the network versus the segment approach. I know that we ultimately do want a network, right, of safe routes for bicyclists and non-motor vehicles. But in some cases, I think that part of the explanation that I've heard for the stall on Beauvais was that it was an attempt to make it part of a network across El Camino. And that has even more hurdles than the commercial driveways on Beauvais to make it part of that network with 17th Avenue across ECR. At some points, it seems like to me, a segment's okay. As much as we do want the network, if we can get a segment done, then at least that's something. I mean, this is actually a route that I'm so familiar with, and I will try to avoid Beauvais because it's dangerous. And the reason we don't see bicyclists out on our city streets is because it's dangerous. If we have more bicycle lanes, we'll see more bicyclists. And so I think that we should, as much as we want the network, we shouldn't ignore the opportunities when a segment does arise. And I know that there are those other issues of the commercial and office spaces and the driveways. But if us as the commission and if there's anything that we can do to try to get the resources more available, then I think that that's something that we should try to push for. I mean, we've heard at, the budget meetings with city council that they have this, that we've heard that there is 3 times more funding for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure in the new budget. But if you look at the budget, everything for fiscal year 24 and 25 is all for planning. The first time that we're actually going to see any of that money for implementation is, correct me if I'm wrong, but 2026. That's 2 years from now that we have to wait for safe bicycle lanes. I mean, I'd like to see the city of San Mateo really get on par with some other cities around the around the peninsula and other places. If there's anything that we can do, again, I would like to have, that come from, for that to come to the commission so that we can help you get the resources you need. One thing that has been talked about in the past is quick builds and other pilot projects. I'm wondering, is that something that there is funding for? If we do have some sort of quick build, if you want to just maybe, Sue Ellen, explain that, exactly what that entails and how that would be funded? And if that's something that we should be looking at as, until that magic funding comes in 2026, what are we going to do in these 2 years in between? I mean, that's a lot of hours for a lot of bicyclists out there who are struggling. Every time I get on a bike, I go into panic mode. It's dangerous. And I might look like a middle-aged mother, but I used to be a stunt person, and I get scared on my bike. So that's why we don't see that many bicyclists. And if we have safer routes for bicyclists, we'll have more bicyclists. I've been corresponding with some of the bicyclists, the high school students at Aragon, and they actually recently surveyed the people who do bicycle to school. And the comments were really shocking of how much that they say that they would like safer roads. And these are children who bicycle to school because they don't have a car. They have no other option. And the fact that they're bicycling is keeping more cars off the road, which is good, it's reducing traffic. So the more that we can have safe lanes for these bicyclists of all ages, going to school, going to work, doing their short little errands instead of getting into a car. Let's reduce traffic, let's reduce greenhouse gas emissions, let's get more people on bikes or walking or scooters. And I would just really like to be able to work with staff and help get you the resources that you need. Thank you.
Yep. Was that your comment?
Well, I think it started with me asking what can we do to help you? What resources do you need?
All right,
yes.
That's your question. Okay, all righty. Just a couple of questions here, and I'd like to leave up this map. So I see 15-mile-per-hour school zones. Sue Ellen, tell me, how is this all going to be enforced? Do we know?
We have the current staffing with San Mateo Police Department. They are everywhere that they are able to be.
I know that,
but they will be enforcing on a rotating basis. The areas are already in their rotation. They are aware of this project and are partnering with us on it.
Right.
But do we have traffic officers who are able to be at every street at every moment? No, we don't have enough staffing for that. But they are aware of the implementation and they will be rotating through in order to enforce it. I wanted to note that there will be a 30-day warning period so that vehicle drivers can be informed and educated about the new speed limits, in addition to all of the community engagement that we're doing. But then, yes, the police officers will be rotating in order to provide enforcement as able.
Right, all right, so the police are obviously involved in this project and aware of it. And here's why I bring it up. I will share with you, I live on Hacienda. And so the most effective speed enforcement, and I've talked to the police, in fact, they have spoken to our neighborhood, is the speed bumps, speed cushions, whatever you want to call them, that are on 28th and 30th. They're very nice. And they work. And they work. The installation on 30th and 28th, or 31st and 28th, wherever they went, when I talked to the neighbors, they like it. I mean, it's effective in controlling speed. Here's what happens. When we did an update last time, I asked, actually, Jay was here last month giving an update, and I asked him about, well, now that we're going down to 15 miles per hour when children are present, what does that do to a neighborhood to qualify for speed bumps? And now I think it's virtually impossible, because to qualify for a speed bump, you have to meet the 85th percent quartile of the speed limit outside of 15 miles per hour. So what happens is you get far fewer cars, is what takes place. That's my interpretation, that it's going to be far more difficult for these neighborhoods to qualify for speed bumps. Now, if I am wrong, I'd love to know that. But my interpretation is these neighborhoods with the yellow, and there's a fair amount of them, will never qualify for speed bumps due to the reduction in the 15 mile per hour speed limit when children are present. And children are present sometime as early as 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. So if you have a different interpretation of that, I would love to hear that, but that's mine. And that is the best that's the best enforcement.
So if I
sorry.
Sure, please, yeah.
If I may, Chair Rowinski, so it doesn't necessarily mean that under the existing conditions that these segments would qualify for speed bumps to begin with. So what we do see is that these speed zones for around schools have been effective, and they do facilitate, for enforcement. So I understand what you're saying in terms of the, lowering the speed. Speed bumps, it's not just an issue of conducting speed surveys. It's also the type of segment, the grade of the roads. There are other factors that go into determining whether a segment is suitable for speed bumps. So I cannot tell you if these would even qualify based on the existing speed surveys that we have and the characteristics of the roads and the types of roads that they are. So, but what we do know is that these treatments have been effective, specifically during school hours, in terms of just making these areas much more safe.
Sure.
And Chair Rowinski, if I could just add to that, the areas marked in yellow that are eligible for 15 miles per hour, those are only up to 500 feet from a school boundary. So that's about a block or so. So just keeping in mind, it's not several blocks that qualify for 15 miles per hour. It needs to be within 500 feet of the school boundary.
Right, so it's 500 feet prior to a school boundary.
Within 500 feet of a school boundary.
Of a school boundary, okay. All right. I'm sure that one will be revisited again. I just have a couple of questions here. When we had our update back in what looks to be March. Oh, leave that on, please. Actually, yeah, if you could just leave that, that would be good. We had our update back in March. We mentioned Class 4 bike lanes would go into Delaware, 28th Avenue, the 28th Avenue Gap, and the 19th Avenue Fashion Boulevard project, and that there would be a loss of on-street parking. I just want to reiterate the importance. And I see, by the way, on June 21st from 3 to 7, there's going to be a public outreach on the 19th Avenue Fashion Island project. And hopefully, this will be an opportunity for staff to query about loss of on-street parking there, and possibly getting some ideas or feelings from the residents who might be affected by that. Sure, please.
Just to clarify, Chair Rowinski, we have not yet even embarked on conceptual design for this
Right.
corridor.
This is feasibility.
So loss of parking is purely potential. There are likely other options that may be considered.
Okay.
That is certainly one option that may be in consideration in a concept, but I just wanted to clarify that that's not a foregone conclusion.
Okay, and that is correct. You define this as in the feasibility stage.
Correct.
Right, okay. And so other alternatives obviously will be at this stage. I mean, this is the most important stage in my mind, because really, decisions that are made now, will drive the rest of the project moving
Correct.
forward.
Correct.
Okay, and then any movement on the Hillsdale pedestrian bike overpass over 101? Back in March, we mentioned the grant application regretfully was denied. And any next steps in terms of reapplying for that pedestrian overpass?
We don't currently have any plans. There haven't been any grant call for projects that qualify.
Right. So going back to, you just said something very important. So you're saying that there aren't any grants available that this project would qualify for?
That are open at this time.
Yeah, open and would cover
And
a project
accepting applications, correct.
of this nature?
Yes.
All right. Because it's really I think, the only pedestrian walkway overpass over 101 in our city is,
Third Avenue.
yeah, Third Avenue. Otherwise, Belmont's got one, and Third Avenue, and then I don't know what is north of Third Avenue there. Okay. I think it's the Millbrae, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, last question here.
Burlingame has a new one.
Burlingame, that's what I'm
Adjourn.
thinking of, yeah. Last question. Christy Elgshire, sorry, Christy, I butchered your name there, sent in an email back on Saturday regarding a lot of questions relating to ECR improvements, pavement management, and walk and bike audits. Swellen, is there a question or two that would be relevant to our discussion tonight that maybe you could respond to on for Christy? But I think based on the number of questions, it's probably best that she also contact staff. But I don't know if there's a question or two that we could respond to tonight that would be relevant.
I can speak to the question about the bike audit that's upcoming on the 24th and the concerns about those who don't feel capable or confident enough to join in on that. We have really thoughtfully created an extensive community engagement plan for the Complete Streets project. So that's including online engagement, that's including focus groups, a walking tour for those who prefer to walk, a bike tour for those who feel comfortable biking, pop-up events where people already are congregating. And that's just in this initial phase. We have additional phases of outreach. So I very much appreciate the comment that she made and welcome that anybody who is interested engage in any way that they feel comfortable at any point throughout the project and share their feedback on why they don't feel comfortable, for example, biking in the city and therefore joining the bike tour or something to that nature. But we do have a project website for that. It's cityofsanmateo.org/completestreets. And that's where we'll be posting all of our engagement opportunities, including our online engagement map will be available shortly.
Very good, okay. Yeah, so the city website's very, very important. One last question, sorry to do this. I'm starting to notice a lot more motorized vehicles on sidewalks, and when I say motorized vehicles, wrong word. Motorized skateboards, scooters, I'll just say scooters. Is there any any state law, do you know, in the process that might regulate some of this? I don't know if the city can regulate it, but, or is this something for Diane Pappin?
Offhand, I don't know the answer to that question, but we can look into it and get back to you.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's anything in the works, because there's a lot more scooters, I'll just say motorized
Micro-mobility devices.
Micro-mobility devices, whatever we want to call them. And I'm seeing a lot more, and the sidewalks are for pedestrians.
Understood.
Okay, thanks. Do we have any public comment online?
Okay, we have 4 raised hands. The first one is Max Montner, and you are now, you're ready to speak now.
Amazing, thank you. I was just wanting to comment and ask the commissioners to join us for the walk and bike audits. I think in your roles, we as a community would absolutely benefit from your participation. The first of these audits is actually tomorrow evening at 6 p.m., starting at Sunnybray Elementary School. We're going to be walking 1.5 miles. Should take us maybe, well, 1.5 hours, walking it relatively slowly, and to questions about parking and walking and folks who might not be able to bike or might not have a bike. I think the walk audit is an amazing opportunity for you as commissioners to participate and get a lay of the land in neighborhoods you might not ordinarily spend time in. I know that's true for myself. I live near North Central, and so Sunnybray is an area I'm less familiar with. So I hope to see all of you there tomorrow evening, and if not tomorrow evening, at the bike audit in a week or so. So yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Max. Speakers?
Next speaker is Thomas Morgan. I'm sorry, Mike Swire.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Mike.
Great. Well, thanks to the commission, and thanks for all the hard work from Sue Ellen, Bethany, Azalea. I know you guys have a lot of projects and a limited funding, so we appreciate everything you guys do within your constraints. I just had a couple quick comments and questions. Very excited for the 15-mile-per-hour project. One question is, originally we had separated this into 2 phases. I think it was lower school and then upper school, and now it seems like there's 3. And I want to understand why that happened and if that means there's going to be further delay. Second of all, the 15-mile-an-hour, I noticed that Humboldt, next to College Park, as well as San Mateo High School, was not going to 15, and that seems like a huge miss, given that there's just so many kids biking in the new bike lanes on Humboldt and also on Poplar. And I want to make sure that even though they've got their own space, that they feel as comfortable as possible. So I wanted to check into that. It sounds like we already discussed quick builds. I was interested in learning more about that because the mayor had mentioned that, and the city did a great job with the Bay Meadows with the CNN incident and responding quickly. And I'd like to see more of that happening, given the low cost and huge benefit. I'd really want to advocate for safety projects being incorporated into the paving projects. As part of the Safe Routes to School Fellowship Program, we identified a lot of opportunities around San Mateo High School last year, most of which were actually pedestrian as opposed to for bikes. And it doesn't seem like any of those got incorporated to the paving that just took place there. So that seems like, unfortunately, a missed opportunity. Similarly, back to San Mateo High School, where my kids go, it looked like, I'm glad to hear you did consult the elementary school district as part of the complete street study, but I want to make sure you guys were talking to Smush too, because obviously there are several public high schools in the area, and they should have input too, because they do have good ridership, a lot of pent-up demand. And then finally, I just want to say to the commission members, last time we talked, there was a lot of discussion about they're always hearing from the activists, for instance, on the North Central project, and not from the neighborhoods. And this doesn't seem fair, or it seems a little short-sighted. I really encourage the commissioners to come out and see the people that are biking every day in the bike lanes. I went out on bike to work day, and there were 100+ people. Most of them local people from the neighborhood. These are neighborhood people. It's not just the activists. And they are low income. They're people of color. They don't have cars, a lot of them, and they don't have time to come to these meetings. So this is not a activists versus neighborhoods. There's a lot of people in the neighborhoods that need the bike lanes to stay safe and to get where they want. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Next speaker, Thomas Morgan.
Good evening, Thomas Morgan again, speaking as a private resident. Over the summer, a couple times, me and my daughters enjoyed the Humboldt bike lane down toward Coyote Point. There's one section between, I live in Sunnybrae, so I go down 10th, so between 9th and 10th on Humboldt, the bike lane doesn't seem to go that far, so I was kind of curious if they're ever going to add that, or if it's just going to forever be that way. Second comment, there seems to be a lot of tension between parking and bike lanes, and it seems like a compromise is needed, so I wonder if maybe like no parking during the daytime from like 6 to 6 or 7 to 7 during the week, to allow be more bike friendly during the day, and then, a lot of people like parking in front of their house at night, and if it's like work trucks, they're going to be up and out of those parking spots at 6, 7 in the morning anyway, so I don't see why they can't share, and we are limited on infrastructure, so I think we need to get as much out of everything as we can. Also in the Sunnybrae neighborhood, I noticed when they redid the sidewalks, seems to dip in some areas, and when it rains now, it seems like it collects and makes it a little bit harder to walk, so kind of just going forward on those projects to be more cognizant and try to prevent that from happening, because you have to walk around and go into the street and get back on the curb, and it's a little inconvenient. Also with the micro-mobility stuff, I like to encourage people to get out of cars, but then I'm also wondering if those actually, there's always seems to be a chip shortage, so I'm wondering whether the benefit of those uses are better versus having more electric vehicles, and if there could be any kind of analysis on that. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Thomas.
Next speaker, Thomas Morgan.
We just heard, that's who spoke.
I'm sorry. David Hunt.
Good. I just wanted to echo some of the commissioner's comments on ways to influence vehicle speed without enforcement. I think it's super exciting that we're getting lower speed limits near schools, and we have some streets. I live near Palm Avenue, with a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, but just super wide lanes that invite high speeds. And we should consider these opportunities in the future if budgets and resources allow for these safety improvements, especially near schools, especially to benefit the safety of our children. Our current process for implementing those projects, as was briefly touched on, was last updated in 2006, I believe, from what I can find. It's a long time ago, 17 years. It'd be good to revisit that, get it updated. I'm sure there's a lot that's changed in industry and approaches, and possibly in priorities in the city over that time. Enforcement with public safety resources is it's really expensive. It's limited in where we can apply it. it doesn't work when those resources leave. Infrastructure improvements, whether it's speed cushions, speed bumps, other options that are out there. The 2006 document actually has some really good options in it. But I think the process we could get those implemented and kind of streamlined would be good to revisit and talk about. And I guess lastly, I'll add, those infrastructure improvements are there 24/7. They allow those public safety resources to move to other priorities rather than handing out speeding tickets, which no one likes to get, and I'm sure that they don't love that part of their job either. All right, thanks for the time.
Thank you, David. Any other speakers?
I see no other speakers.
Okay. All right, I'm going to close public comment, bring it back to the commission if you've got another question, but otherwise some comments for Sue Ellen, and we'll close out this item. Commissioner Robbins.
Sure. Sue Ellen, you asked, and sadly I can't come on the 23rd. I will be hiking, not biking, but I will be in Yellowstone National Park, so sorry. As to the prioritization mapping for safety, option number 1, I'm a strong proponent. I think the other items are all valuable, but I think safety has to be our number 1 priority as a city when it comes to our streets and our circulation. That's it.
Commissioner Rottmeyer.
So to follow Commissioner Robbins, I cannot make the June 23rd event either. Thank you for the invitation. I might go tomorrow night, though, to be determined. And I also agree that safety, I like the waiting map options, and I think safety is probably the most important, although they all are important. I do want to follow up on the approaches that we have to reduce speed, with speed humps being one of them. There's also the idea of curb extensions, which can also be integrated with low-impact development and flood, more opportunities to also capture some flood water and things like that. And I'm wondering, is that maybe an option that's not just for speed reduction, but also for flood mitigation as well. So I just wanted to put that on the table, and I know that it is in some existing plans, and I don't want for us to forget about that and think that speed humps is the only thing. Yeah, I think that's my only comment at this point. Thank you.
Before I go to the feedback on that, I just want to go back to a couple comments Thomas Morgan made. And one, and I do recall when we were doing North Central, there was a discussion about enforcing no parking from like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and allowing people to park in the neighborhood. And I think that was next because it was difficult to enforce. I don't recall why, but it never made, it didn't make it into the plan, or maybe it has now. But my only point is we might want to go back and revisit that.
Through the chair.
Sure, please.
On Humboldt, we have parking on one side of the roadway.
Right.
And no parking on one side of the roadway. The center line of the roadway was shifted over, and the bike lane is less wide than a parking lane. So if we had vehicles that were parking in the bike lane overnight, then vehicles that are traveling through in the through traffic would have to go around the vehicles.
Right.
They would be basically butting into the travel lane. They'd have to go around those vehicles and cross over the center line in order to navigate the roadway. So that presented an issue in terms of oncoming traffic. So that was why that option was not pursued. Yeah.
Okay, and like I said, I do remember discussion, I also remember discussion on enforcement, but I think it's still an option, it's still, I think, and so you work with many different options, I think it's worthwhile to consider in certain parts of the city.
It would be something to consider where feasible.
Right.
In that location specifically,
It
with
was
the
not
roadway
feasible.
alignment, it was not.
Yeah, it was not
Correct.
physically feasible. And then Thomas also brought up about the Humboldt Bike Lane. He seemed to be very, enjoyed it, but mentioned about a segment out to Coyote Point. I don't know if that, and you don't, I don't know, maybe that's, if that needs to be completed, maybe it comes into the a master bike plan, I don't know, but.
In my notes, I had that he had mentioned that there was no bike lane between 9th and 10th.
Okay,
On
was it
Humboldt, and that is in the proposed network. That is correct. The bike lane joins into the existing bike lane on 9th Avenue.
Right.
And so it does not continue past 10th to 10th.
Right, okay, so that is in the analysis phase, or it's on the radar screen?
No, in the network,
Yeah.
the connectivity for that specific area was the bike lane connected at 9th Avenue, and then in order to continue south, you would go west on 9th Avenue and then take Bike Boulevard through the Sunnybury neighborhood.
Oh, okay, all right.
So there is no proposed bike lane through to 10th Avenue
Through the 10th.
in this bike master plan.
Okay, all righty.
Through the chair, if I could just
Please.
address a couple
Yep.
of the other questions that Mr. Swire had raised. On the school zone speed limit, he had asked about the project being originally separated into 2 phases. I spoke about 3 phases. So the first is public, elementary, and middle. Second is high school, and then third is private schools. I apologize. So we do have 3 buckets, if you will. Phases 2 and 3 are being bid out and designed together. So in construction, we're going to actually have it done into 2 chunks, basically.
Right.
And the question about coordinating with the high school district, I just wanted to touch on that. We have been coordinating with the high school district on outreach as part of the citywide Complete Streets Plan. They finished their school year earlier and were very immersed in end of the year graduation, all that great stuff. So we're going to join up with them once school starts back again for phase 2 of the outreach in the fall. So I
Okay.
just wanted to clarify that we are not missing the high school district. They were just very much engaged in their own activities, rightfully so.
Sure. Okay, great, thank you. And regarding commission feedback, I would like to do the bike and walk tour. I work during the day, so I have to see how my workday goes. I also see there's one in Sunnybury tomorrow night. But I would like to attend these, work permitting, in that respect. And regarding the citywide complete streets, confirmation of approach, it sounds reasonable to me. I didn't see anything that really caught my attention. But I do have a quick question here. If we want to, where would the public get to know about these, about the bike and walk tours? Is that on the, somewhere on the website, Complete Street, or is it, where would somebody find out information on that?
It's on for the walk and transit tour tomorrow, and then the bike tour as part of the Complete Streets Plan on the 24th. Those are on the Complete Streets Plan website, cityofsanmateo.org/complete streets. The tour of 19th Avenue and Fashion Island on the 23rd is geared more toward project stakeholders, so council members, commission members, et cetera. So that is not publicly advertised.
Okay, all righty, thank you. Okay, with that, I think we're going to close out this section here, and thank you as always, Sue Ellen. You'll be back before we know it. Final item on tonight's agenda is reports, announcements, and meetings of interest. Does anyone have anything they would like to say? Commissioner Robbins.
Yeah, just remind people that next Thursday starts the music series in the park, and it's always great, and it's nice to go buy beer and wine from the Park Foundation. All the money then comes back to help the city's parks and recreation.
Commissioner Rotman? No? Okay. I do. I have a couple of things I'd like to just bring to people's attention. The citywide yard sale is July 21, Friday, July 21st through Sunday, July 20, what would that be, the 24th. And it's an amazing citywide event for people who want to hunt for treasures at amazing prices, and people who want to reduce some of their clutter. The city does, by the way, post a map of the location of all residents who are hosting a yard sale in that 3-day period. And for anyone who's interested, to send an email by July 14th. So once again, the event is July 21st through Sunday, July 24th. But it's to send an email by July 24th to register your yard for the sale at yard-sale@cityofsanmateo.org. So that's all I'd like to, that's what I have to add in terms of meetings, but I'd also like to note that Azalea Mitch, our current Director of Public Works, this will be her, Azalea, is this your final commission meeting with us?
I do not. I have one more.
You do have July?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'll leave the goodbyes to the July meeting. On that note, our next commission meeting is July 12th, starting at 7 p.m. And this meeting is adjourned. Good night, everyone.